And then he says, in my dream, there was these two women carrying some spices to a tomb.
No way.
And he goes to the tomb's empty. And then an angel appeared and said, God's not dead, he's alive. And then I woke up from my dream in a cold sweat. And I Googled it, and up came Luke 24. And I read Luke 24. And I couldn't believe it. So I closed it down and I Googled it again. And he was like, I dreamt exactly what was in the Bible.
Wow. Hey guys, welcome back to Raw Mission. I'm Matt, your host for this podcast. And in today's episode, we'll meet Jono. He currently works on staff at a church in London, but just a few years ago was working among the 1.5 million Syrian refugees in Jordan. He and his wife ran projects there, working alongside the local Arab church and constantly trying to figure out ways to share the truth about Jesus effectively and how to overcome all the usual objections. Okay, well, today I've got Jono with me. Hi, Jono. How's it going?
Great, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to see you. I'm really excited to catch up with some of your stories. We've had quite a lot of contact, haven't we, since you came back from the Middle East? When was it? 6 years ago?
So we came back? No, 3 years. 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah, okay. Let's go back a bit and just tell us the story of how you and Lucy ended up overseas, living and working, serving God in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, the story goes way back, right? Grew up in a Christian family, sort of church planting parents. They planted a church in Edinburgh in the 80s. And I remember growing up, mum and dad read stories to us at bedtime. And I got to a brother, and there was a couple of years where my dad would read to us stories of wonderful missionaries or wonderful Christian movers and shakers. John Wesley and Elizabeth Fry, or Adoniram Judson, or Hudson Taylor, or Jackie Pullinger, all these sort of...
Yeah.
It just sort of inspired us. And I've actually borrowed one of the Jackie Pullinger books and started reading it to our 6.5-year-old. It's a little bit too much for him, to press pause on it. But I think there's something when you tell someone else's story, that faith gets imparted, and it's not, oh, Dad, your story and yours and Mum. Oh. Yeah, so that sort of, I think that inspired me. And my godparents, they were related to the Moffats, who, Mary Moffat married David Livingstone. So there was this sort of narrative growing up. And then for myself, I was at uni, and my brother and I, we decided one summer to go. We did Greece and Turkey. We wanted to check out some other church sites. And then I emailed this guy called William Dalrymple, who's an author. It's From the Holy Mountain, very good, very interesting book. I emailed him and said, hey, we're going to Greece and Turkey. Anywhere we've got to go. And he replied back a little one-liner. This is 2009. He says, you got to go to Syria. So we're like, okay, cool. So we get a 48-hour visa. We tag on Syria into our itinerary.
Wow, so you were just touring around with your brother, visiting interesting places.
Yeah, we did Mount Athos and early church sites as well.
Yeah. And this is all before the Syrian war broke out, obviously, just to remind us, because I can't quite remember when all that started.
That was 2011. We had popped in Syria one night, driving back from Crac de Chevalier, the famous Crusader castle. And we had this tour guide for the day. We'd met his friend on the bus on the way into Aleppo. It's called Ahmed. And I just remember, he spoke a bit of English. I was trying to explain grace and the gospel to him, and he just didn't get it. And I was just like, who's going to tell these guys about Jesus? I was like, God loves us not because of what we do, but because of what Jesus has done. And he was like, no, it doesn't work like that. And then a few weeks later, I ended up at Forum with UCCF. It's their big summer festival, like New Wine for CU leaders. I was running the Theology Network, it was called. Yeah. And John Piper was preaching. And we were speaking on, I think it was Ruth or Esther, or Ruth, I think it was. But then he did an evening on with a call to mission. Yeah. And I stood up there and I was like, I sense at some point there's going to be a call, and unreached. The stats really moved me. Like 98% of workers or worker money, money that goes to missions goes to the reached. And that's good. That's good to bless sub-Saharan Africa or wherever, Latin America. So that's good stuff.
Yeah.
But we need to get places where the name of Jesus is not known.
Yeah, exactly.
At that time, I was going out with Lucy. We weren't thinking about missions straight away. Got married the following summer. I got a job as a teacher down in Surrey. Lucy was working at HTB and Alpha, and then the war started, and we were moved by that, and we were thinking, oh, maybe a few years down the line, but we were in Greece and Turkey again. This time as a married on holiday, visited some Frontiers teams. They were starting to work with Syrians, and they invited us out to join. But we thought, well, don't want to learn two languages. So, and we weren't even thinking, we were thinking like a few years down the line, we thought move out of Surrey, do the sort of London thing. I was thinking of some consultancy or something. But God really stirred our hearts. So the British sending base at Frontiers put us in touch with a wonderful family in Lebanon. Visited them. They were seeing a movement going on. Amazing stuff there. But we went back and we prayed about it and and we felt the Lord say no. And so we emailed them. They actually got kicked out of the country 6 months later, which would have been as we'd have joined, and it was just them. So we did see the Lord's hand in that. So then, back at square one, I'd handed in my notice at work. Lucy she was open to this all throughout it all, but I think I was the one pushing it. So we said, okay, well, let's try. And we both had some conversations actually that summer, 2013. I had a chat with someone who said, well, you've got to knock on the door of Jordan because there's this window open there for gospel workers. So we, and Lucy had a conversation with someone else, which was pivotal for her. And so we decided, okay, let's give Jordan a go. So we visited a few teams. They were all great, good teams and good things, but we had our sort of ideas in our mind of what we were looking for. And then it was like the last day, we were like, okay, this is our last team we're going to visit. And we're like, maybe this is just some weird idea maybe it's just some narrative we picked up from our family, or I don't know. I don't know what it is. So we, so we prayed and we said, well, Lord, if this is you, final team tomorrow, we want there to be three things. Now, we wouldn't usually lay a fleece. I'm not sure how, laying a fleece can sometimes be a cop-out to growing in wisdom and making your own decisions and common sense and learning wisdom. But we prayed and we said, God, and we said, the three things, we want there to be connection with them as people.
Yeah, that's important.
Enjoy the same things. Like, we're going to be family basically with these guys. Like, this is team. We love Frontiers because they're all about team. One of my brothers and his wife, they were in Brazil with an organization, and they said, like, you guys and Frontiers, it's all about team. And that's so good. We love Frontiers, like the emphasis on team, because that's how you're going to survive and thrive. So there was like this personal connection that we'd enjoy them and that they'd be interested in us as people. The other thing was working with the local church, because whilst many places there isn't a local church, in which case you've got to go alone, where there is a local church, it seems sad if you're not working in partnership with it, at least trying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So that was I think those are the three. Interested in us, the chemistry, and then working with the local church. Maybe that's something else. Anyway, the next day it was tick, 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 and we knew that was the right team. And Lucy
Right.
looked at me and she was like, yeah, this is it.
Wow. And
Spoke
were
to
they
both.
focused on Syrian refugees as well?
So some of them had been in Syria before the war, and then
Mm.
during the war at the start, and then they left or got kicked out. And then some of them had expertise in relief and development stuff, and so they moved
Okay.
over. Then God provided the funds within a month or so. Basically, we came
Wow.
back, wrote some letters. People just like rallied behind us, and then we
Mm.
moved out a few months later. So then it was like a year and a half of language learning full time.
Okay. Did you have kids at this point?
No, no kids.
Mm. Okay, so let's go on to talking about what the team would do. Or once you'd gone through your main language learning year or so,
Hmm.
what else was going on in terms of helping Syrian refugees and sharing the gospel? Give us some stories or insights into that.
Hmm. So we had three focuses. One was do good relief. Two was build up the local church. And thirdly was reaching out to Muslims, helping
Mm.
Muslims find out about Jesus. And ideally there'd be overlap, right? So we were in this neighborhood of 100,000 people on the edge of Amman. And there was a little Baptist church in the area. And, when we went, it had about 7 people on a Sunday night. Neighborhood of 100,000, like 95%, like almost all the women in the area were covered out on the streets.
Mm.
And we came across this little Baptist church. It was the only church. There was no Catholic church or Orthodox or anything. They were wanting to run this club for Syrians. So we got involved in that.
Mm.
Lucy ended up organizing it. So that was like a kids club every Friday morning, which is the equivalent of a Saturday morning. They'd rent a bus and they'd pick up like 40 Syrian kids from all around the area.
Mm.
And it was like, hygiene stuff. And so how to wash your hands, brush your teeth, as well as like looking after yourself, and some sort of like very simple sort of trauma therapy stuff, teaching a little bit of English, a little bit of Arabic, writing. We wouldn't do that, obviously. As well as just fun and games. And because a lot of these kids weren't in school. So then off the back of that, we'd be building relationships with the families, doing home visits, and with distributions there. So if there were families that needed blankets or new families that come in, mattresses, sort of food packs at Christmas, that sort of thing, heaters, fans, depending on the season.
So were most of these guys living in houses at this point, or were they still like new refugees living in tents?
Yeah, so like in Jordan at that time, there were about 1.5 million refugees. Only half were in the refugee camps. So like there were about 1 million refugees in Amman itself. So yeah, these were all in our neighborhood, these ones. We were also involved in another church that was visiting in like it's called a Palestinian refugee camp. It's not, it used to be tents, then it became like caravans, and then it became like breeze blocks. So that's
That's right. Because usually refugees, get more established and
right.
That's right. They build up settlements, don't they? And they because they may have been there 20, 30, 40 years. And so it becomes just part of the city eventually. But yeah, so that's why I was just asking, because I know obviously initially there are huge tent camps run by the United Nations and so on, and then they gradually merge them into some kind of better living.
Yeah, so we were doing that. And then because I've been a teacher as well, I at one point did a literacy project with the same NGO, which we ran through community-based organizations around Jordan and churches, some mosques and some like nurseries and stuff, ran this literacy program just to help kids with English. And then we did an Arabic textbook as well. So helping kids improve that because the resources weren't great. So we would give them resources, give them training.
Tell us a bit about how the families were feeling in those days. Was there a lot of hopelessness? Was there this expectation that it's okay, we're going to get back to Syria, or we're going to get out to the West? Or was it just such a mix, different people feeling different things? What was the overall impression you had of them?
Good question. My Syrian best friend, he was shot in a demonstration and so was injured and fled across the desert with his 14-year-old pregnant wife. And
Oh, gosh.
He was 17 at the time or something. There was quite a lot of hopelessness then among Syrians. And then ISIS came on the scene quite early, our first summer, 2014. There was an ISIS cell raided by the Jordanian secret police about 10 minutes down the road from our house, if that. A lot of the ISIS fighters from Jordan came from this refugee camp, which was 10 minutes down the road from us. So that was quite sobering.
Yep.
When you get these emails saying, like, make sure you change your route every day.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, because you think of Jordan, very modern Arab nation, good relations with the West, and you think of it as a pretty safe place. So that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that kind of...
Right, but it keeps it safe because it's got a strong secret police who pride themselves on trying to know everything.
Yeah. So do you think everyone knew in the government what you guys were there doing? Not only that you're doing good NGO work, but that you're also there to talk about Jesus?
I mean, there was actually one point, it's about a year in, went to renew my visa, and I had that dreaded moment where they said, "You got to go in. We want to speak to you." And it turns out it was just a routine to the secret police. Turns out it's just a sort of routine thing. They just want to know why you on a tourist visa, because I was like, well, our language center didn't give those sorts of visas. But that was quite a funny ordeal. It wasn't funny at the time, but I had a little snack in my pocket. It was like, it wasn't a sausage roll, but it looked like a sausage roll. They don't do pork, obviously. And I got it in my pocket, and the guy's like, at the secret police base, he's like, "What's that?" And I say, "It's a sausage roll." And he says, "Bite it." So I had to eat it to show it's not a bomb or anything, just to prove that it wasn't like stuffed with anything. But yeah, no, it was like, "Why are you here?" I was like, "Well, we want to serve Syrian refugees." Like, and he was like, "What do you do?" I used to be a teacher or whatever. He said, "Are you a Christian?" I was like, "Yeah." And he actually calmed down after he heard that, because one of the other guys who was on the bus in the secret police with me, long beard, Muslim, British guy with like Yemeni Palestinian heritage, and Palestinian heritage, but he spent time in Yemen. Okay. So he was like, so they're scared more of the Muslim, not scared, they're more concerned about the Islamist types than the Christian. Yeah.
Okay, so you got the relief work going on, in partnership with the local church, and then you talked about discipleship of the local church as well as reaching out to Muslims and
right. So with the local church, just trying to get involved and build them up, and so we did Alpha with the adults, and then we did a youth Alpha, and that was really exciting just to see. We found it was a really good tool for discipleship,
because it was originally a discipleship course, wasn't it, Alpha, not just an evangelistic course?
Right. And I mean, it's both. It's very effective in the West as an evangelistic and discipleship tool, but in these areas, it's great for nominal Christians. But for Muslims, it's not really us answering the questions that Muslims have.
So you were doing Alpha with the local church in Arabic?
I mean, there was all the videos, and we just lead the discussion. And the point of the discussion, anyway, is that the host doesn't speak, so we'd have to teach the local church leaders, like, the point is not speak, let them do the talking. It's not for you to tell them what to think.
That's hard for everyone, even here, to get out of the habit of, I think.
So we were doing that to build up the local church, and we were trying to get locals involved in reaching out to Muslims, and it was a great church. They were a church, they had a big heart for reaching out to their Muslim neighborhood, particularly the pastor and his wife.
And was it something they would have been doing anyway before you came, or that you gave them a lot of confidence by your partnership in that?
I think both. It gave them confidence. It gave them resources. Because we were able to give significant time.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so give us some highlights of your time there, or key relationships, or amazing things that God did.
I mean, one of the great stories, I mean, it's all about people, isn't it? But a month in, we're just doing up our house, and we say, we need to get a bench for our balcony. So we go up the street to our find a local carpenter, and we say, "Oh, can we get a bench made for the balcony?" And he says, "Yeah, sure. You got to meet my son Hamude because he wants to practice English." And so the next day, we go up and meet Hamude, and he's like, "Why have you come from London to Jordan?" Like we weren't even in the trendy bit where all the expats lived.
Yeah.
It's like conservative, dusty backwater. Like from our roof, you could see the desert. Like, why have you come here? And I said in our best Arabic at the time, like, "Bidna nati al-amal min Allah lil-Surin." We want to give hope from God to Syrians.
Mm.
And he said, his jaw dropped, and he said, I think God sent you to me."
Wow.
And God had been working in his life. The Holy Spirit had been moving in him. He'd been like desperate to find out more about God, to find out more about Jesus. And he'd been like listening to worship music online, and we hang out. And then I was this like, we used to give coffee. He had all these questions, but he was like 17 at the time or 18. I said, "Well, all your questions, all the answers to all your questions are in the Bible, but I can't read the Bible with you unless we get permission from your dad." And then he turns to me a few weeks later and he's like, "Oh, by the way, my dad said I could read the Bible with you."
Wow.
And so I was like, "Well, I better ask." So I like plucked up the courage and learned the Arabic, so I go to him in the carpenter workshop and try to find a moment between him like sawing, vroom, vroom. "Please, can I get permission? Vroom, to read, vroom, the Injil with your son." And he looks at me afterwards and he's like, "Tamam," which is just like, "Sure, okay."
Sure. Why not?
Which was just like such an anticlimax in my mind. But it was like the perfect answer. Like, hey, what else did I want?
Yeah.
So from then we did like some sort of creation to Christ discovery Bible study. It's very simple. And then we go back to the UK to have the birth of our first child, and go back to Jordan when he's 6 weeks old. And Hamude says to me, "Oh, by the way, when you were gone, I had a dream." I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
And like we'd read like some creation, like Adam and Eve and stuff, but we hadn't really, and we'd done like the birth of Jesus, but we hadn't done probably done a few miracles, but hadn't done anything else. And then he says, "In my dream, there was these two women carrying some spices to a tomb."
No way.
And we go to the tomb's empty, and then an angel appeared and said, "God's not dead, he's alive." And then I woke up from my dream in a cold sweat, and I Googled it, and up came Luke 24, and I read Luke 24, and I couldn't believe it. So I closed it down and I Googled it again, and he was like, "I dreamt exactly what was in the Bible."
Wow.
6 months later, we're going to hang out, going to do a little Bible study together or something. He said, "Oh, by the way, I had a dream the other week," and we hadn't read any stories about like the Sea of Galilee, no boats, nothing, no fishermen, nothing. And he says, "I had a dream, and in the dream I was in a boat, and I was fishing, and I was getting nothing. And then Jesus appeared behind me, and he put his arm on my shoulder, and he said, 'Throw the nets out again.' I caught loads of fish." And he said, "Hamude, I'm going to use you." And he said to me, what do you think this means?" And I said, I've got our Bibles open on our phone, and it's pretty clear what it means.
Wow.
And he's
so cool.
I think his moment is still not yet happened in terms of like, I think God wants to use him as an evangelist, and God is using him to draw people to himself. But I think that true, like the biggest fulfillment of that hasn't happened yet. I mean, Hamude's probably only like 26 now or something, so he's still younger.
I love that. He was the first guy you saw come to faith, right? And he's a carpenter in the Middle East.
Carpenter's son. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that. And actually, because his story was so powerful, that dream, and that brings us on to the journey to truth. We put that in because so many Muslims come to faith through dreams.
Yeah. So tell us. You just mentioned Journey of Truth. What's that?
Yeah. So going back to the language learning, we were in Amman, city of 4 million people, big city, uh, getting taxis every day. I met about 700 taxi drivers. I figured I had spiritual conversations with about 400 of them.
Sharing this podcast is a really good way to encourage more people to get involved with God's great mission, whether locally or globally. So please do help us get the word out there. If you use an iPhone, it's pretty easy to write us a review, and that has a big impact on how many people can find us. Alternatively, you could share one of your favourite episodes with your church family or home group or CU, either in person or on WhatsApp or social media. Thanks, guys, and now let's get back to the podcast.
I met about 700 taxi drivers. I figured I had spiritual conversations with about 400 of them. And I kept coming across the same objections. Jesus isn't the Son of God. Jesus is just a prophet. Didn't die on a cross. Christians believe in 3 gods. Bible's being corrupted. And they're answering me and they're quoting the Quran. And my Arabic's like improving, but it's not fluent. And I'm thinking, well, there must be something that can answer these guys' questions in an engaging way that's respectful, that's like Jesus focused. And so I did some research. I didn't find anything out there. There's some really good stuff out there, but some of it is like very attacking or denigratory of like Muhammad or Islam, and I didn't feel that wasn't where my heart was. And some films look quite dated. And I had this thought, well, what about if we had some little animations, and each episode could answer one of those questions, and then you could share it with a taxi driver or with anyone. And I loved animation because animation is what young people love. It's not and explainers are done in animated form. And what about if we had these 4 characters where you hear the different, you've got all these different personalities and personas and types of people. You've got the very religious type, and we all need to give voice to that, right? But then you've got the guy who all he cares about is women and how he looks and his new hairdo or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had this idea, like, hey, what about if we had this animated series that answered them all? And I sort of shared the vision with some people, and we got a team together. And then so we're fleshing out the 4 characters, giving them all names, and got this arc, this journey that they're all going to go on. And then the day before the next meeting, like 2 weeks later, I get an email from one of the guys, and he's like, oh, by the way, I was just mucking around with some of the characters last night and just trying to work on some dialogue, and just, what do you think about this? And I read it and I showed it to Lucy. I was like, this is gold. Like, this is our script writer. I'd been trying to find a script writer for months.
Oh, yeah. So this is a local Arab Jordanian guy?
No. This is like an American guy. He's like Texan, larger than life, legend. And he just has the gift of the gab. And he's like, he's got it. And so he writes this amazing script, and we're like, right, we know who our script writer is. And so then we just work through, right, what do we want to cover? What points do we want to make in each episode?
Yes, all the different objections to faith in Jesus and the Bible and so on.
Right. So at the beginning, we like redefine forgiveness. That since it's ultimately done against God and a debt's got to be paid. So a Christian concept of forgiveness. And then we got to redefine sacrifice, because in Islam, sacrifice is about associating with the poor. Whereas the Christian understanding of atonement is very different.
Yeah. Sacrifice for the Muslim is, what can I do more and more and more to try and please God and show him I'm a decent Muslim. Right.
So then these new ideas, the religious guy, Allah in the Arabic videos, he's like, where have you been getting all these crazy ideas from? Like, he said it challenges Abdullah. And Abdullah says, well, I've got them from the holy books, the Torah, the Zabur, the Injil, so the Old and the New Testament. And so then there's this big blow up, big argument about has the Bible been corrupted? And we give about 7 reasons in episode 3, infused with comedy and with amazing animation.
Yeah, that's what I love about the videos because obviously, as you know, I've seen them. I'm a big champion of these animations. I think they're fantastic. And yeah, that's what I love. I love the mixture of young guys on a bus, Muslim guys chatting, having fun, joking around. It's easy to watch. It's funny, and yet deeply serious as well, touching on the biggest questions of life.
Right.
And somehow you've done it, like the script writer, and you guys just worked
Yeah.
out a little thing that works. It's the
Yeah.
balance is beautiful. It's incredible training. It's great for Muslims, great for Christians to kind of look at and think about. Oh yeah, wow, you can engage with Muslims in sharing the gospel in a kind and gentle but strong way as well. And yeah, I think you've done it brilliantly. I'm a massive fan. Of course, then it's been translated into so many languages, isn't it? We helped with the Pakistani version in Urdu, but how many languages has it been translated into now?
It's currently in 12. We're currently working on Central Asian Russian. We're
Mm,
doing an Indonesian dub right now.
yeah,
Love to get it
nice.
into Moroccan,
Yeah.
um,
And that,
French.
I mean, that's a lot of work and it's a beautiful product. I love it. But obviously, you wouldn't do that if it wasn't actually having a big impact on Muslims themselves, right? What give us some of the anecdotes, stories, or what did you see through those animations and how did you get them out there into people's hands?
Yeah, yeah. So the idea was like have it that people could use, that gospel workers could use with people out in the field.
Mm,
They've been used. We use them out in the Middle East, and we've got a team still using them on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube,
okay.
Facebook, all that sort of stuff out in the Middle East.
Mm,
But they've been used across the world
hmm.
they've been used by gospel workers, like local and national, international expat believers, um, and broadcast. So they've been used across the Muslim speaking world. I mean, they used it in the West as well.
Mm.
People across Europe and North America using them.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I always have a stash of these little cards in my pocket with the animation pictures on the front and a little QR code that links them straight to the videos. And yeah, I just think that the easiest thing to give to a taxi driver, shopkeeper, have a little
right.
chat, say, oh, you should check these out. Like, which one of these four
Yeah.
Muslim guys are you like? You like the serious Islamic,
Yeah.
religious one, or you the funny guy? And
Yeah.
I just find them really easy to give out. Yeah, so we'll put a plug in the notes for those. But journey to
Amazing.
truth.tv,
Journey,
isn't it?
yeah, journeytotruth.tv.
Yeah, and we should mention the British version too. It's doorof.life. That's the website. But yeah, we'll put those in the show notes. So yeah, any other sort of anecdotes of stories you're
Yeah,
hearing as the social media stuff goes out?
I mean, just one of the stories which was just such an encouragement. It was like, so we were in Jordan 4.5 years, and then we were invited by one of the teams that we're working with. They said, "Hey, do you want to come to Lebanon with us?" So we were like, oh, don't know how long to go for, whether to go or not. We were like, is this a 20-year thing? Is that a 2-year thing? Anyway, God led us
Mm,
there for a year to see the project through to the next phase, hit the ground running, set up the campaigns over there, which was great.
mm,
And alongside that, I was getting it into all these other languages because I wanted to make headway on that.
mm,
Um, and so I was trying to find, wanted to get into Farsi because we've obviously got 70 million Farsi Iranians, Farsi speakers. And so I was trying to find someone in Lebanon who spoke Farsi, Arabic, and English, because then they
mm.
could go between scripts. Because I'd got this studio in America, this Farsi studio, they had like translated, but I just needed someone to check them.
Okay.
So we I managed to track down this woman who'd studied Farsi at Tehran University, and she wasn't a Christian at that stage. Grown up as a Muslim, was in it. Yeah.
Was she from Iran?
She was Iranian.
Yeah.
She was actually Kurdish.
Mm,
But she studied Farsi, so she was very good at Farsi. I told her what to do, and I gave her the files and said, "Can you check the script?" She rings me back, so we have to chat, and so I give her a call, and she said just after I'd been spending all Friday and Saturday editing the script, and on
mm.
Saturday night, Jesus appeared to me for 2 hours in my room, and
Wow,
she said,
2 hours.
and she said, Jesus said, I'm starting afresh with you. I'm wiping the slate clean. She'd had a really abusive marriage, really troubled background. And she said, and Jesus told me that I was his daughter. And she was just in tears. And I mean, I was in tears. It was just so powerful. And she was like, I've already told my sister, I've got to tell all my family back in Iran about Jesus. It was just a real,
Wow.
yeah, it
Hallelujah.
was amazing. And yeah, so God's been using that. I mean, just in Lebanon, it was amazing. Like we would do online ads. We'd do some like chatbots and stuff. This was like Facebook Messenger when that was big. We do these little chatbots like, hey, do you want to watch some videos about Jesus? And you do a little chatbot, and we'd send them a new episode every day, and so they'd go on this journey. And then by day 7, in the video, there's like the guy has a dream, which we'd taken from Hamude's story. And we say, have you ever had a dream from God? And you know, with a chatbot, you've got like a couple thousand people starting at the top, and then every day like a few hundred drop off. And then by the time you get to like day 7, and you've got like 20 people, and you say, have you ever had a dream from God? It was like 12 people would say, yeah.
Wow.
You know, people would respond, and they would say, you know, do you want to meet up? And some people PDF Bibles and meet up with those that were interested. And I mean, one of the guys that we got connected with, he said, you've got to meet my friend Khaled, because Khaled's had a dream from Jesus. So then Khaled like gives his life to Jesus. He's like, oh, I've also got another friend who's also had a dream from Jesus. He's told me I've got to follow Jesus. So he starts becoming a follower of Jesus as well. And they introduce him. It's like, and it just goes like from one to the next. And the amazing thing in Lebanon is this is cross like sects. So this is like a Druze guy introducing him to like a Shia guy, introducing him like, and which is just so beautiful in the body of Christ, because there's a lot more openness there. Whereas in Jordan, we had to be more careful.
Wow, that's really encouraging. I mean, it's good also just for some of our listeners who are, you know, considering, is God, you know, leading me to the nations, to go overseas, to work amongst unreached peoples. It's great for them to hear that, you know, you don't just have to be a teacher or a doctor or run your own business, which for some people is pretty daunting. But actually, you know, you could do a lot on social media in terms of outreach and campaigns and working with a local church, and so many different things you can do, aren't there? And in this digital age, why not? You know, we've got so many skilled people in this country who are very tech savvy, and using that for the gospel is a great thing.
Right. Like I never thought I would be doing that when I went out to the Middle East, but hey, you got to be open and see where the Lord leads. I mean, one of the great things that I did learn out there was it's all about team. My script writing is awful, but God provided. I just learned the power of team. Some of the guys on our team on the Journey to Truth project, amazing theological minds, you know, from Piper's Church, and like the editing minds. Whereas there are other ones of us who are more sort of creative, and then others who are just like one of the guys, a bunch of them are actually incredible networkers. So we were able to get our videos far and wide. I was chatting to a guy at church like a year ago, an Egyptian guy. And I was like, oh, I got involved in these like Journey to Truth videos when I was out in the Middle East. He was like, oh yeah, of course, I know those. So they have gone far and wide. It's all about finding partners. Your partners that believe in it, that want to use them. So and I was just at a conference about 2 months ago, and there are so many workers wanting to get them into their language because they're very sensitive to Muslims.
That's right. Yeah. No, it's brilliant. It's really encouraging.
I think something that we learned, we went out to the field. We were like, we'll go for at least 2 years, and we'll take 2 years at a time. And I think something we learned was about seasons. We learned that, you know, certainly when we were out in the field, like, right, we did that relief project for a season, did another relief project for a season. God called us to Jordan for a season. And some people God calls for the long haul. and he
Mm.
gives extra grace for that. Some people he calls for a season, and that's okay. I mean, I'm reading in the Bible in a year this morning about Paul and all his church planting. He was going around constantly.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think I'm called to that. I'm not called to move around constantly, but there's different callings and there's different seasons as well.
Yeah.
And so going to mission fields in the past, a century ago, it was go for take your coffin.
Yeah,
Where
exactly. Yeah.
It's not like that anymore, and
Mm.
we can go for a season. I think
Mm.
that's
Yeah, that's a good word, definitely. Because, yeah, even for those who want to go for 20, 30 years, you've got to hold it lightly. Like us, you might be kicked out. And it's actually really encouraging to be chatting to someone who chose to come back because they felt that that was God's time for us to do 5, 6 years, 7 years.
yeah.
And then, okay, we feel we've done what we wanted to do there. And now it's time to come back. And that's good because so many people come back sort of booted out or expelled. And that's a different experience. Well,
Mm.
I mean, Jono, it's just really good to hear some of these exciting stories of fruitfulness and hunger and openness, and just even in just a few years out there that God called you to do. But were there any tough times? What were the hardest things about living out there for you or for Lucy?
Yeah, life was not simple out there. There was just gay stresses. There were
Mm.
cultural moments. There was the time when the landlord's cousin took me outside and shouted at me, shaming me in front of the whole neighborhood. That sort of thing.
Wow,
And I
why? What
responded
had
in
you
my,
done?
oh, I'd ruined the view. I'd put a flue outside because it was so cold. We had water dripping into our house in the
Yeah.
winter rains. So I put this like 1940s Syrian heater in the like front room with a flue outside the front, and it's you've ruined the view. It's ugly. You till tomorrow to fix it.
Oh wow.
Lost a few £100 in the process. Anyway, whatever. Um, Struggles. Yeah, it's hard bringing kids up abroad when ministry is visits where kids get pumped full of sugar and
Mm.
there's a lot of smoke and there's
Mm.
unhealthy food, up late, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, if you want your nice little routine, putting your kid down at the right time, it doesn't really work in the Middle East, does it?
there was, yeah, just a quite high level stress when the ISIS came on the scene that I mentioned.
Mm.
Um, Struggles. We had a stalker. To clarify, most men were very respectful, but
Mm.
Lucy did have sort of low level harassment every time she left the house every day.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really hard.
Men, there'd always be some men looking, in such a repressed culture,
Mm.
and Western women just being seen as loose,
Hmm.
they would, the way they would look at Lucy was, be considered harassment in
Yeah.
the UK, or comments, there would be comments, there would be, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of little underlying stress things, aren't there, in a culture that's not your own. And there's so much
Yeah.
going on under the surface, behind the scenes, and it's just trying to figure out what's happening. And yeah, you're just out of your depth
And
a lot of
also
the time.
the other struggles, there are struggles where you feel let down by local believers,
Hmm.
Christian background, Muslim background.
Yeah.
That's the reality. But you're there because God loves Muslims and Jesus
Mm.
loves Muslims and he died for them. And you're there because you're trying to make yourself available. I find, like, in English, my home culture, I'm not a very bold evangelist. Like, my sister and my dad are like, they have the gift of evangelism and they're bold and they've seen hundreds of people. Dad's seen thousands of people come to faith. But
Wow.
in Arabic, that I found, I was like, I've got nothing to lose. What's the worst? I could get kicked out of the country. I found this like boldness,
Yeah.
just like rise up. I mean, it wasn't linked particularly with that, but it was just like I didn't have any of the cultural baggage. They're being quite blunt with me. I can be blunt with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think there also is there's something about this is why we're here. It
Mm.
gives you a different mindset, and you're part of a team that are praying for one another and asking questions. Hey, who did you chat to today? Who did you meet? And it gets you thinking and gets you praying and gets you boldly out on the streets sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, just going back to that seasons thing, we felt God called us to the Middle East for a season. We were there 5.5 years in total. We see ourselves planting or leading a church, sending workers out to the harvest fields in the future, cross-culturally. But I do remember we came back to the UK and we were sharing at our home church in Guildford. And a woman in her early 20s came up to us and she said, "Oh, can you pray for her?" So Lucy and I prayed for her. And she said, my parents were workers out in West Africa. And I grew up out there, but for a few years, and then I came back. I can't remember any of it. And she said, my parents always go on about it. And it was like, those were the glory days. And I think there's something to be said just for the worker community when we return. Just the narrative, what's the narrative that we give our kids? Yeah, they were, when, if our kids were there, like, let's talk about it, but the adventure continues. Following Jesus, wherever we are, our family, it's about helping people come to know Jesus, whether that's in Jordan or Lebanon or in London or in wherever. It doesn't matter where God takes us. That's what we're about.
Amen. Yeah, it's a good word. Yeah, that's right. You can't live in the past and you can't live on past stories, past experiences. We serve a living God. We got to seek him today and say, Lord, use me. And, you're at work everywhere. So I want to be part of that, whether it's in sending, going, cross-cultural work here, praying, giving. Yeah, we want to be part of the kingdom expanding because there's so much. That's what the church is for, isn't it? We're supposed to be either a battleship out on stormy seas or maybe like a lifeboat, something like that, and I think too often we think of the church as a bit of a yacht, a pleasure cruiser, a cruise ship or something, and we're just chilling till Jesus returns. But no, we're part of an adventure. We're part of a movement, God's kingdom coming around the world, and that's what should excite all of us in the church. All right, Jono, we've had a great chat, and I probably should draw this to a close. So, yeah, you're back in London, you and Lucy, and you're working in church now, and you feel this calling to plant churches here and become a sending church. That's really awesome. Any final words you want to say? Any final tips for young folks here or around the world who are thinking about serving God, amongst Muslims here or overseas?
I mean, I'd barely met any Muslims before I went to the field. Just get like any opportunity you get to hang out with Muslims, just jump at it. The hospitality is such a big one. Invite them over. Invite yourself over. That honors them. Like we never do that in British culture, but actually, in traditional societies, if you invite yourself over, it brings honor to them. Go take a gift, but go and meet them. Tell me about your culture. Tell me about your food. Like we became foodies since we were in the Middle East. Like, we even now with our kids, we started just before lockdown, and then lockdown, we've done food from around the world each week. So we find out about a country. Lucy gets a recipe, gets the kids cooking it, and we do it on Friday nights. And we dress up, get a music going on Spotify, watch some like drone footage of the country on YouTube, and then cool. But we're even doing it with our home group, our Connect group at church. Like we're doing one in a couple of weeks. We did one on Ukraine, getting people to pray. Let's get our minds off of ourselves, our spiritual walk, and our little like battles. Let's get into the world. Let's get our eyes off ourselves and off of our country as well. So yeah,
I love that, and that's such a powerful word. Whether it's for ourselves or for our families or for our churches, we have a big God, and He's not content just to work on our individual hearts. He's got a great plan for the nations. He loves the people. Jesus wants a bride from all the ends of the earth. And that's a joy for us to be a part of that. Thanks, Jono. It's been really good hanging out with you. Great to hear your stories again, some of which I'd never heard. And we'll keep being in touch as we work through this Journey to Truth project and try and do more with that in Britain. But it's been great. Yeah.
Bless you, Matt. Cheers.
All right. God bless. Bye. Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. For more, check us out on our website, frontiers.org.uk, and on all social media platforms @FrontiersUK. Have a great week and make sure you don't miss our next episode.